My sister texted me a photograph from a book festival and asked why my wife was signing romance novels under the name Mara Voss. In the banner behind Emily, a man I had never met had one arm around her waist, and the caption called them, the real-life partnership behind 6 years of love stories. Emily had told me she was spending that weekend at a medical editing conference in Savannah. The pen name confused me. The word partnership frightened me. I was standing in the operations room of the Columbus Transit Authority, halfway through correcting a Saturday bus schedule, when Tessa's message appeared. The first photo showed a line of readers in front of a table stacked with dark blue paperbacks. The second showed Emily smiling beneath a banner that read Mara Voss and Elias Ward, the Harbor Glass series. She wore a green jacket I had seen in our hall closet that morning and no wedding ring. In the third photo, the man beside her was leaning close while she signed a reader's book. Tess had added, "Aaron, I'm not guessing. That is Emily." She saw me and left the table. My first reaction was not a fair. It was identity theft, someone using Emily's face to sell books. Emily was a freelance medical copy editor. She worked from the spare bedroom of our apartment, spent her days correcting training manuals and patient education materials, and complained that most writing became worse when committees tried to make it safer. She had never published a novel. At least that was the sentence I believed until I searched Mara Voss on my phone. 6 books appeared. The oldest had been published 5 years and 8 months earlier. All 6 listed Elias Ward as co-author. The author website included a video, and when I pressed play, Emily's voice came through my phone saying, "Mara began because Elias and I needed a place where we could tell the truth without asking permission." She looked different under studio lights, but not disguised. Her hair was shorter in the earliest video. She wore clothes I recognized from trips she had described as editing workshops. Elias sat beside her, finishing her sentences with the ease of someone who knew which story she would tell next. I watched 30 seconds, stopped, and looked around the operations room. 2 dispatchers were arguing about a detour. A radio announced that a bus on Cleveland Avenue had a broken mirror. The ordinary world continued while my marriage acquired a public author page. I was 46. Emily was 44. We had been married 18 years and had chosen not to have children after years of honest conversations, one miscarriage, and a final decision that belonged to both of us. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment because neither of us wanted a house to maintain. We kept one joint account for rent and shared expenses, separate professional accounts, and retirement plans through our own work. Emily's income changed from year to year, but I knew the range. Our accountant prepared a joint return, and I signed it after reviewing the summary. A line for editorial and consulting services had never seemed suspicious because that was exactly what Emily said she did. She traveled 6 or 7 weekends a year for professional conferences, vendor meetings, and continuing education. I sometimes teased her that copy editors held more conferences than surgeons. She would come home with hotel soap, a canvas tote, and 2 days of stories about people whose names I forgot. Some details had been true: airports delayed her, hotel heating failed, an event moderator talked too long. She changed the profession and the names, not every physical fact. That mixture had given her stories the texture of honesty. Looking at the author event calendar, I recognized the cities: Savannah, Louisville, Pittsburgh, Madison. Every festival date matched a weekend I had spent alone, assuming she was learning about readability standards or meeting hospital clients. I told my supervisor I had a family issue and left an hour early. On the bus home, I searched only public pages. I did not try to access Emily's email, guess passwords, or call the hotel. Mara Voss had a newsletter with 8,000 subscribers, a podcast archive, a publisher biography, and photographs from bookstores across the country. The career was not enormous. There were no bestseller banners or television deals. That made it more believable and, in a way, more painful. Emily had not lived a glamorous fantasy that burst into view overnight. She had built a durable second profession, one reading, one contract, and one weekend at a time. The reader community was large enough to fill a bookstore and small enough never to cross my path. Her interviews lived on genre podcasts I did not follow. Her author photographs were styled with darker hair, heavier makeup, and the name Mara printed above them. Anyone who knew Emily would recognize her, but a search for Emily Bell returned medical editing directories, not novels. The system did not require an impossible disguise. It required separate audiences and my reasonable assumption that I did not need to search for another version of the person sleeping beside me. Elias Ward was 48, a former newspaper features editor living in Cincinnati. His biography said he and Mara had met in an online writing workshop 7 years earlier. Together they wrote emotionally precise novels about ordinary people whose hidden choices reorganize a family. A publicist who probably did not know I existed had written the phrase, but it described my position with uncomfortable accuracy. At home, I opened the drawer where Emily kept copies of our tax returns. The returns used her legal name and reported freelance revenue close to the amount she had told me. The payers on the attached schedules were abbreviated corporate names I had never asked about. Nothing immediately showed missing income or tax fraud. Her professional account was hers to manage, but the annual statements she shared for our budget showed deposits and expenses consistent with editing. I stopped myself from converting secrecy into financial guilt. The records showed a hidden identity, not embezzlement. Tess called from Savannah. She was there with a friend who illustrated children's books. She had walked past Emily's table, recognized her, and said, "Em." Emily went pale. Elias asked if they knew each other. Before Tess could answer, Emily told him she needed water and left through a staff door. A festival volunteer then told Tess that Mara would return for the 4 o'clock panel. "Do you want me to wait?" Tess asked. "No," I said. "Do not follow her, film her, or confront him. Go enjoy the festival." "Aaron," she looked terrified. "I know." Tess asked whether I knew the name Mara. I said I had learned it 10 minutes earlier. After we hung up, I found the festival live stream page. The 4 o'clock panel was titled "Writing Love with the Person Who Knows Your Ending." I nearly closed the laptop. Instead, I set it on the kitchen table and listened because Emily had chosen to discuss this partnership in public. Elias answered most of the first question. He said their working relationship survived because they maintained radical private honesty. Emily smiled at the phrase but did not add anything. The moderator asked whether readers were wrong to see the Harbor Glass books as a record of their own lives. Emily said, "The events are invented. The emotional weather isn't." Elias touched the back of her chair. The gesture was small, practiced, and intimate enough that the audience noticed. Someone laughed softly. The moderator asked how long they had been partners. Elias said, creatively, 7 years. In every way that matters to the books. Almost as long. Emily looked toward him rather than the camera. She did not correct the implication. Then the moderator announced that their publisher had acquired 3 more Harbor Glass novels and a related collection of essays, with joint appearances scheduled through 2028. I stopped the stream and searched the trade announcement. It had been released 9 days earlier, the same day Emily asked whether I would consider reducing my transit hours the following year. She had said my schedule made spontaneous travel impossible and that her editing income could cover more of our expenses. I thought she was asking us to spend time together. The public announcement described a 2-year tour and expanded collaboration with Elias. The Hidden Life was not an old manuscript or an affair she had failed to end. It had contracts, readers, a calendar, and a future extending beyond every plan she had discussed with me. On our refrigerator, beneath a magnet from our 10th anniversary trip, Emily had left a handwritten list titled "Next Year." It included Oregon, fewer night shifts for me, and more room for us. I had read that as a shared plan. Now I understood that the room already had occupants, deadlines, and a name she had never said inside our home. Emily texted at 6:17, "Tess found me. I know you have questions. Please let me explain when I get home tomorrow." I replied with one sentence, "Who is Mara Voss?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and returned. Finally she wrote, "She is work I was afraid to claim." She did not mention Elias, the photograph, or why work required a false conference. I told her I would be at the apartment Sunday evening and would not continue the conversation by text. Then I turned off notifications without blocking her. I had one day before she returned, and I made rules for myself because unbounded searching could convert me from a deceived spouse into an intruder. I would examine public material, records Emily had already shared with me, and information offered voluntarily. I would not open her laptop, enter the spare bedroom cabinet marked client files, or ask Tess to collect evidence. The rules did not calm me, they prevented panic from choosing my methods. The first Harbor Glass novel was available through the library's digital catalog. I borrowed it under my own account. The dedication read, "For E, who found the door before I admitted there was a room." That could have referred to Elias or Emily. In the acknowledgments, Mara thanked a medical editor named Emily Bell for precision, shelter, and the quiet labor that lets fiction survive. My wife had credited her legal self as if Emily and Mara were colleagues. Elias was thanked for the life between pages. I closed the book before chapter 1. The language did not prove an affair, but it showed how deliberately she had divided herself. On the publisher's website, each title had an event archive. I copied dates into a simple list and compared them with the shared calendar Emily and I used for travel. I did not map every dinner or phone call. I checked only major claims. A Minneapolis clinical language seminar was a library keynote. A weekend with a hospital system client in Nashville was a romance convention. A 3-day visit to an editing collective in Boston included 2 bookstore events and a podcast recorded with Elias. 2 trips were legitimate medical editing meetings followed by author events she had never mentioned. The lies did not replace her real career, they were stitched into it. That made the system easier to maintain. At noon, our accountant, Priya Shah, returned the urgent message I had left through her client portal. I said I had discovered that some of Emily's reported professional income came from publishing rather than medical editing and asked whether our filed returns distinguished the sources. Priya would not discuss Emily's separate account transactions without authorization, even though we filed jointly. She did confirm what appeared on the returns I had signed: all known freelance income had been reported under Emily's legal name, publishing payments were included in the business totals, and the returns did not list Mara Voss because a pen name was not a separate taxpayer. "Are you asking whether income was hidden from the IRS or hidden from you?" Priya asked. I said, "From me." She answered carefully. "I can explain the return. I cannot tell you what your spouse disclosed in private bookkeeping conversations unless she authorizes it." That boundary was proper. I thanked her. The call removed one dramatic possibility and sharpened the real one. Emily needed no fake corporation or illegal account. She had placed accurate numbers inside a false explanation and relied on me to respect her professional privacy. I found an interview recorded 18 months earlier. The host asked Mara and Elias how 2 private people sustained a public creative partnership. Emily said they protected the ordinary lives around the work by never naming relatives, legal identities, or home addresses. Elias added, "There are people who know Mara only as Mara and people who don't know her at all." They both laughed. The host treated it as a pen name joke. I heard a description of me. Later in the interview, Emily told a story about a man who scheduled bus routes and believed every problem could be solved by moving one connection 6 minutes. The audience laughed when she said, "He never sees the person sprinting between stops." I had said almost those exact words during an argument about her first attempt at a novel 7 years earlier. She had shown me 40 pages after midnight and asked what I thought. I was exhausted from a winter service emergency and told her the plot felt like missed connections that could be fixed by changing the timetable. I meant the manuscript, but she heard a verdict on her imagination. The next morning I apologized for being dismissive. She said it did not matter and never showed me fiction again. Listening to the interview, I could see the injury without accepting what she built from it. I had failed a vulnerable moment. She had answered by creating a professional identity designed to exclude me. At 3, Tess sent one more item without being asked, a photograph of the festival program she had picked up before recognizing Emily. I told her not to send anything else. The program biography called Mara and Elias, the collaborative pair behind 6 novels, for national tours, and a forthcoming essay collection about creative intimacy. It did not describe them as married or single. Their public packaging preserved ambiguity. That ambiguity mattered because it meant I could not infer a physical affair solely from the festival photograph. They might have encouraged romantic speculation to sell books while remaining platonic. The secrecy would still be serious, but I needed to separate what I knew from what I feared. I opened a notebook and made 3 columns: public fact, possible explanation, question for Emily. 6 published books was a fact. A physical affair was still a question. The cropped author identity was a fact. Whether the publisher had required secrecy was a question. The exercise felt cold, but it stopped every touch in a photograph from becoming proof merely because I feared it was. I searched the copyright catalog and publisher records, not to claim Emily's work but to establish duration. Her first registration had been filed under her legal name 6 years earlier. The latest listed a completed manuscript delivered 3 months ago. The trade announcement included a quote from Emily: "Elias and I have finally built a life spacious enough for the work we still owe each other." That word life could still be metaphor. The schedule attached to the publisher's public announcement could not. It listed 14 appearances over the next 22 months, including 3-week-long residencies. Several fell during dates Emily and I had discussed using for a trip to Oregon. She had let me compare flights while knowing she had already promised those weeks elsewhere. I checked the date of the announcement against our messages. 2 hours after the publisher posted the deal, Emily had sent me 3 rental cabins near the coast and asked which one I liked. The gesture had felt hopeful at the time. Now it looked like a placeholder, an imagined trip offered after the real calendar was already committed. The next morning, Gwen Parlow, the email contact on the author website, replied to a message I had sent the previous night. I had identified myself as Aaron Bell, said I was verifying whether the public schedule for Mara Voss was current, and asked no personal questions. Gwen wrote, "The dates currently posted are confirmed. Mara and Elias are contracted jointly for all listed appearances. Additional dates will be announced after venue approval." She added that private matters should be directed to the authors. The reply established only the professional commitment, but it closed the innocent explanation that Emily was experimenting privately or planning to stop. I added Gwen's email to the fact column and stopped searching. By then every central question had a fair boundary. Emily could explain the pen name, the lies about travel, the financial labels, the future schedule, and Elias. More browsing would produce detail, not a different category of truth. At 5, I printed 3 pages, Tessa's original festival photo, the public event calendar, and the trade announcement. I added our shared calendar with the conflicting Oregon dates. That was enough. I did not print intimate-looking photographs or a stack of interviews. I did not need to overwhelm Emily, I needed answers that could change my decision. She arrived Sunday at 7:30, pulling the same gray suitcase she used for conferences. For a moment we both performed habit. I reached for the handle. She said, "I've got it." We stood in the entryway while the wheels settled against the floor. Emily looked toward the kitchen table and saw the pages. "How much did you watch?" she asked. "Enough to know Mara is 6 years old and booked through 2028. She closed her eyes. I said, "Before you explain why you wrote, tell me whether Elias is your affair partner." Emily kept one hand on the suitcase. "Yes," she said. "For 3 years." Emily repeated it, "Elias and I have been physical for 3 years." She did not call it a mistake or reach for a softer word. I sat at the kitchen table. She remained in the entryway until I told her I was not going to shout and wanted the door closed. Then she placed the suitcase beside the wall and sat across from me. I asked questions in an order I had written on the back of the trade announcement. Had Elias been in our apartment? No. Had Emily used our joint account for travel, promotion, or gifts? She said no. Author expenses came from her professional income, though the joint account had covered ordinary expenses when her income dipped after large tour costs. Had there been a health risk? Yes. They had not always used protection. We agreed to medical testing. Where had they met physically? Mostly hotels attached to festivals, twice at Elias's home, and once during a writing residency. There was no second apartment, shared lease, or hidden household. Had they discussed living together? They had talked about spending longer periods in the same city after the new contract, but made no housing plan. Did Elias know she was married? Yes, from the beginning. Did her agent and publisher know her legal identity? Yes. Did they know about me? Gwen knew she was married but had never met me. Most people in the author network knew Mara kept her legal life private and did not ask. Had Emily represented herself as divorced or single? She said not in contracts or official biographies. At events, she removed her ring and allowed people to assume whatever made the partnership legible. Why? I asked. Emily looked at the festival photograph. Because readers understood Mara and Elias. They would have looked at Emily and Aaron and asked why I was hiding a marriage. Then I would have had to explain you, and explaining you made Mara feel less real. I am not asking why you used a pen name. I'm asking why being my wife interfered with your reality. She pressed both hands flat on the table. The writing began 7 years earlier in an online workshop. Elias was the instructor who took her work seriously after I dismissed the pages she showed me. They began exchanging chapters, then rewrote a manuscript together. A small publisher acquired it. Emily was certain the book would fail, and she decided to tell me only if there was a second contract. When the first book sold modestly and the publisher asked for another, secrecy had already become part of the process. She opened a professional account with money from editing, hired an agent, and reported all income under her legal name. Every time there was a point when I could tell you, she said, there was also a reason to wait until the next point. The first festival became a second book, then a tour, then Elias. Their relationship turned emotional before publication and physical during a residency 3 years earlier. She said Elias never demanded that she leave me. He believed our marriage was companionate and that I preferred not to know the details. You told him I consented by not asking. No. I told him we had separate lives and an understanding. What did he think the understanding allowed? Emily swallowed. Privacy. Other attachments, if they didn't disrupt home. Did you ever hear me say that? No. We had separate work accounts. That was the understanding. Emily nodded. I turned privacy into permission. I know. I asked whether she loved him. She said yes. I asked whether she loved me. She began with my name, stopped, and said yes again. Love did not resolve the contradiction. With me, professional privacy meant trust. With Elias, my absence meant permission. Public ambiguity made their partnership marketable. Each version protected Mara. I asked whether Elias had ever challenged that arrangement. Emily said he did, especially after the 4th book. He wanted weekends not organized around my work calendar and disliked leaving events separately. She answered by promising that the next contract would force a decision. The contract arrived, and instead of deciding, she asked me to reduce my hours. I pointed to the tour schedule and asked why she wanted me to reduce my hours. Emily said my schedule had made our marriage narrow, and she hoped that if I worked less, we could travel together between her appearances. As what? I asked. Your husband in private while Elias stood beside you in public. She looked down. I had not solved that. You had signed it. I tapped the 14 dates and 3 residencies. Feelings had not booked them. She had signed a structure, then invited me to rearrange my work around it without naming it. I asked what she planned to tell me before the first trip. She said the essay collection was supposed to be the point when she revealed Mara. She believed telling me about the career first might make the affair easier to understand later. You planned a staged disclosure. I planned not to lose everything in one night. You planned which truth I would receive first so I would be invested before the next one. Emily said that sounded manipulative. I told her it was manipulative. Emily took off her glasses, wiped them, and put them back on, but the tears continued. I know how this sounds, she said. I also know sounding sorry is not the same as undoing it. She said writing was the first place she had not felt useful before she felt alive. In our marriage, she was the person who tracked refills, corrected forms, remembered birthdays, and made language safe for other people. As Mara, she could be excessive, romantic, vain, and wrong. Elias admired those parts instead of depending on her competence. I listened because I recognized the marriage she described. When my father died, Emily handled the hospital bills while I returned to work. When her mother needed surgery, I created a transport schedule and treated punctuality as comfort. We had become excellent at maintaining life and poor at asking whether either of us wanted the life being maintained. That failure belonged to our marriage. 6 years of concealment still belonged to her choices. You could have asked me to know Mara, I said. Emily answered, I was afraid you would read one page and reduce her to a problem. So you made me the only reader who was never allowed to decide. For a while neither of us spoke. I asked if any of the books used identifiable facts from my family. Emily said the events were fictional, but some emotional material came from us. A father's death in Book 3 used details from the night my father died, the vending machine coffee, the broken elevator, my mother insisting on carrying his shoes home. Names and circumstances were changed. I felt a different kind of exposure. Those details were not secrets in a legal sense, but they were memories I had not knowingly offered to a commercial story. Emily said she believed transformation made them hers too because she had lived the night beside me. I said, maybe some of the grief is yours. Permission still matters when a living person can recognize himself. She did not argue. I asked whether similar material appeared in the unreleased manuscript or essays. She said yes and offered to show me the drafts. She also admitted that Elias had read early versions containing those memories and had assumed I knew she used them. He knew the marriage existed, but not every boundary she had crossed inside it. That did not make him innocent in the affair. It did clarify that Emily, not a publisher or co-author, had made the decisions about my private history. I declined. Reading every page would not restore consent after publication, and I did not want to become an editor of the life that excluded me. I asked her to provide, through attorneys if necessary, a list of passages drawn from identifiable private events before any unreleased work went to print. She agreed to ask the publisher about revisions, without promising an outcome she did not control. That distinction made her answer more credible. At midnight, neither of us could absorb another answer. Emily offered to sleep in the spare room. I said I needed physical distance before deciding anything and asked whether she had a safe place to stay. She called a longtime editing colleague named Ruth, one of the few people in her legal life who knew nothing about Mara, and arranged to stay for a week. She did not call Elias. I could not order her not to, I only noted the choice. Before leaving, she opened the spare room cabinet and removed 2 client files, then stopped. There are author copies behind these, she said. Do you want me to take them? I told her yes. She pulled out 3 boxes I had believed contained medical-style guides. Each held novels with my wife's face printed inside the back cover under another name. Emily carried them to her car one at a time. I did not help. When the last box was gone, the cabinet was almost empty. The scale of the hidden life was finally visible as empty space. The discovery took 1 weekend. Untangling it took more than a year. Medical testing came back negative. Priya reviewed our finances with both of us present after Emily authorized full disclosure. The publishing income had been reported, and there were no secret loans, properties, or accounts holding a fortune. Mara Voss had earned meaningful money, but much of it had been reinvested in editing, travel, publicity, and taxes. Some remaining royalties and contract advances were marital income subject to review. The copyrights and future work required separate legal analysis. My attorney warned me not to confuse emotional ownership with copyright ownership. I had contributed to the household while Emily wrote, but that did not make me co-author of books I had never seen. Emily's attorney likewise did not claim that a pen name placed all earnings outside the marriage. We exchanged records through professionals and avoided turning manuscripts into weapons. I kept my transit job at full hours and withdrew the request I had submitted for a reduced schedule. My supervisor asked whether I wanted the request held instead of cancelled. I said no. The plan had been built around a future Emily had not named, and I needed any new decision to begin with facts. Emily rented a furnished studio for 3 months. She and Elias continued their contracted appearances but cancelled one joint podcast after the host proposed discussing the romance behind the books. I learned that from the public event page, not from monitoring them. I stopped checking the author site after 2 weeks because every update reopened the same question without changing the answer. Emily and I met with a couples counselor for 4 sessions, not to preserve the marriage automatically but to decide whether there was a relationship both of us could enter honestly. She offered passwords, tour access, and the complete publishing archive. I did not want them. Transparency could verify a future action. It could not recategorize 6 hidden years as an ordinary omission. More importantly, Emily did not want to stop writing with Elias. She said she could end the physical relationship and keep the contracts professional. I believed she might mean it. I could not spend 2 contracted years interpreting every shared stage, hotel, and residency. Asking her to destroy the career would not rebuild our marriage. Agreeing to the career as structured would require me to live inside the arrangement she created without me. In the 4th session, Emily said, "I want to be one person now." I asked which life the one person would keep. She answered, "The writing." That was honest. I said I was ending the marriage. We had no children and no house to sell, but 18 years still occupied an apartment. We divided furniture, retirement contributions subject to legal advice, the joint emergency fund, and boxes of photographs. Emily took the desk from the spare room. I kept the kitchen table where we confronted the truth. The lease ended 4 months later. On the final Saturday, we emptied the spare bedroom together. Without the desk and cabinet, pale rectangles marked the walls where shelves had protected the paint. Emily found a festival badge behind the radiator and held it as if deciding whether to explain. I said, "I know what it is." She put it into her box. We did not conduct one last trial about every object. I moved into a smaller apartment near a direct bus line to work. Emily moved to Cincinnati, where Elias lived, though she rented her own place. I knew because her attorney provided the address required for the divorce, not because I followed her. Tess wanted to post the festival photograph and identify Mara as my wife. I asked her not to. The affair was relevant to our marriage and legal process. Exposing Emily's pen name to punish her could affect employees, contracts, and readers who had nothing to do with the deception. Tess said I was protecting Emily. I said I was protecting my right to decide what kind of person I became after being deceived. Our parents received a short explanation. Emily had maintained a concealed publishing career and a long-term affair with her co-author. We were separating, details were private. My mother asked how someone could publish 6 books without her husband knowing. I told her the same way people hide many durable things by placing each piece inside a normal explanation and relying on trust to keep it unexamined. That answer did not make me feel foolish. Trust is not negligence merely because someone uses it. A few friends asked how I had missed 6 covers and dozens of events. I stopped answering a question that treated discovery as a contest rather than deliberate distance. The unreleased essay collection created the most difficult practical issue. Emily's publisher was not obligated to let me approve a manuscript, and I had no general right to erase experiences simply because I recognized them. Through counsel, Emily identified 4 passages based closely on private family events. 2 were broad enough that I had no objection. One described my father's final night with details I considered intimate. Another used a story about our miscarriage, an experience that belonged to both of us and had never been shared outside immediate family. I asked that those 2 passages be removed or substantially transformed. Emily agreed. The publisher accepted revisions because the manuscript had not entered final production. I did not receive editorial control over the rest, and I did not ask for it. The solution was narrow and incomplete, but it protected the 2 memories I had actually placed in dispute. The divorce became final 14 months after Tess sent the photograph. Emily and Elias remained co-authors. Whether they remained a couple was no longer information I needed. Their next novel performed well enough to add several events, not well enough to turn either author into a celebrity. There was no public scandal, destroyed career, or crowd demanding justice for me. Mara Voss continued to exist. The fact that Emily kept the identity did not mean I had failed to expose the truth. My decision was about whether I would remain married to the person who created it in secret. For a while, that distinction was difficult. Each new public photo looked like proof that her hidden life had one. Eventually I understood that leaving was not a campaign to make Mara disappear. It was the end of my obligation to absorb the cost of keeping her. 6 months after the divorce, Emily emailed from her legal address with the subject line, "Permission." She was drafting a new essay about maintaining 2 professional identities and wanted to include the moment I found author copies behind the medical files. She described the scene in 3 sentences and asked whether I consented to being represented, unnamed, as the spouse who discovered them. The request arrived years too late to repair the earlier books, but it was the first time she asked before converting my experience into material. I read the message twice. Part of me wanted to say yes because the act of asking mattered. Another part understood that meaningful change did not obligate me to participate in the evidence of it. I replied, "No. Please do not use that scene or a recognizable version of me." Emily answered, "Understood." No defense, no argument about shared memory. The exchange did not feel warm, but it was clean. She had asked before using a scene, I had declined, the answer ended the subject. It was a smaller change than an apology and more useful than another explanation. I saved the exchange with the divorce records and did not continue the conversation. A week later, I visited the main library to replace a transit planning manual our office had lost. One of the Harbor Glass novels stood on a return cart near the entrance. I recognized the cover from the boxes in our apartment. I picked it up, felt its weight, and read the dedication I already knew. Then I put it back on the cart. I did not need to read 6 novels to prove the life had existed. I did not need to hate the work to name what its secrecy had cost. Emily had built Mara from parts of herself I failed to welcome and choices I never consented to. Both facts remain true. One gave me something to learn. The other gave me a reason to leave. At the checkout desk, the librarian scanned the transit manual and asked whether I had found everything. For years, that question would have sounded impossible. That afternoon, I said yes. I had not found every conversation, hotel night, or line borrowed from our marriage. I had found the system, the future it protected, and the boundaries still available to me. That was enough.